TikTok live. We're notifying viewers that you're live. Yay, we did it. We figured it out. Let me slide by you real quick and grab a hair clip because I'm all ready to warm. Okay, we're still here. We're getting things figured out. Okay. Hello, people. Is anyone here yet? I can't see. You can get rid of it. Keep going. We're letting more viewers know you're live. Thank you. Appreciate it. TikTok has been suppressing me the last few days very rudely. So we'll see how many people they let come to the live. See how many shenanigans we can get up to.
Someone joined.
Hello. Hi, people. Zoe said she might join us, so we'll see if she hops on at some point. I didn't need to bring my Kindle because it's not an actual cover of the book, so that doesn't help us at all. Okay, people, we are here to talk about our October book club pick, The Distance Between Us. I'm Tory. You've seen my face many times before, and here with us today is our wonderful intern, Kyia.
Hello.
I know. How exciting is that? She had a great time reading the book with us. No. Okay. If it's faded out, then not mess with it.
I can show the cover like
yes.
this.
There we go. Our fantastic book club pick. Very timely, given everything in the news with the election. So, yeah. Are you ready to get started, Kyia?
I am.
All right. What did you think of the book? Let's start with that. Just a general thought.
It was really good,
Mm-hmm.
but very frustrating to read about like all the struggles and abuse and just. I'm surprised that the like actual crossing of the border was like just within one chapter.
Yeah.
Even though they had 3 attempts.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, that kind of happened fast. But I guess you have to
Mhm.
in order to like make it.
She was also like so young when it happened that it's
She was,
like I wonder how much of it she like actually remembers. And it's like such a traumatic thing that she talks about that it's just like how much of it was like fully seared in her memory in a way that she can just like mentally and emotionally safely put it onto paper.
Yeah, and like the book starts of her talking about her perspective from when she was like 4.
Mm-hmm.
So like of course it's not gonna be
Slide in a little this way. Okay. Out of TikTok.
It's obviously not gonna be like have the most mature perspective.
Yeah.
Because a lot of it was just like, where's my mom? Where's my dad? I need them both, but neither are here. I don't know what's happening. I don't know why they're all gone. And it was kind of interesting because I feel like throughout the book, like, of course, because it starts from her perspective at 4.
Yeah.
Like, the older she gets in the book, the more her, like, writing sort of matures.
Yeah.
I thought that was a neat trick to incorporate into her writing.
Oh, that's just saying someone joined. Okay. Hi, people. Welcome. We're talking about The Distance Between Us by Reyna Grande, our fantastic October book club pick.
I guess I should just keep it up. Keep showing it. For those who join.
Yes. Welcome Welcome to the meeting. We're excited to have you here. Okay. Now, we always prepare, I know this is your first book club, a list of questions because Zoe and I always have a lot to say and we need help narrowing things down. So, question number 1. Discuss the difficulties and abuse that Reyna and her sibling experienced growing up, both while still in Mexico and once arriving in the States. How do historical, cultural, and socioeconomic factors intensify their struggles? There was so much happening in this book, guys. Basically, from the minute her mom leaves.
Which is chapter 1.
Yes. For those who have not read the book, this story is about an autobiography by Reyna Grande about her life because her parents left her and her siblings in Mexico to come to the United States to try to earn money for them to build a house. And then eventually they come back and her father brings her and her siblings across the border illegally, and it's their immigration journey into the States. And while they are in Mexico, there is a lot of abuse, and then while they are in the States, there is a lot of abuse. Starting back, I guess we'll go chronologically. In Mexico, their grandmother, Abuela Avila, which the irony of her, that being her name, and she's evil. I wonder if that's actually her name, if that's just like a nom de plume of we're going to call her this, because she was not the nice grandma. But she did not like those kids, and she made it known.
She was the paternal
Yes.
grandmother,
Mm-hmm.
so from the dad's side.
Yes. And she did not believe that those grandkids were actually her grandkids.
Mm-hmm.
So she was awful to them the entire time that the kids lived with her.
She had she was taking care
Mm-hmm.
of another one of her kids,
Mm-hmm.
or another one of her grandkids, and she
Mm-hmm.
very much favored that kid and would
Yes.
kind of take the money that was sent
Mm-hmm.
for
Reyna
Reyna
and her siblings.
and use it for herself and
Mm-hmm.
her favorite.
Yeah.
And they caught on to it a couple
Mm-hmm.
times. But that was just.
And there was so much physical abuse, and they were emotionally neglected by their grandmother, and their grandfather just completely ignored them.
Mm-hmm.
Their cousin was awful. They were not given equal amounts of food, so they were just starving all the time. They got lice at one point, and the grandma was like, let's put kerosene on all their heads. And then if they dare take the kerosene towel off their head overnight when they're 6 years old,
Mm-hmm.
they're gonna shave their heads.
Yeah.
And so that's what they did. They shaved their heads. And it's just oh my God.
Yeah, that was because I was reading the book while I was here.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the first thing that I was I had to stop reading.
Yeah.
And I was like, Tory?
Uh-huh.
What are you making me read right now?
Mm-hmm.
Because I was just so baffled. And, they had candles lit because, the electricity wasn't on at that night. And so they were like, don't walk by the candles.
Yeah.
And it's
maybe this isn't a safe thing to be doing then.
and, the aunt, recommended a
Mhm.
lice kit.
Yeah.
And the girl was like, no. Kerosene.
Mhm. Could we do this? Yeah. But no, we're going to torture the children.
Mm-hmm.
She's awful. Then eventually their mother comes back and is completely neglectful still, does not seem interested in building a relationship with her kids that she has not seen in 2 years. And they move to their maternal grandparents' house, which is, house is a strong word. It is a shack.
Mm-hmm.
And their grandmother there, much better. Incredibly kind, really loved them, but was incredibly old and incredibly poor. So emotional support was about the extent of it. And it was their grandmother, Reyna, Mago, Carlos, and then their mom off and on, because she abandoned the family a lot, and their Tio Crease, who is a real piece of work.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, what all did he do? He was dealing with some mental health issues that were not understood at the time. Swipe right to view interactions. I'm okay, thank you. that were not well understood at the time. And so he would have these violent tears and was just kind of all over the place. And Reyna talks about how he was, sexually abusive, not in the, actually physically touching them, but in the, he tried to pay Reyna to kiss him. And it's like, this is like a literal child. What are you doing, sir? And would just, touch himself in front of the kids. And it's just like, who thinks this is okay? What kind of family is this? It was wild. Let's see. Continuing on, because we're, only halfway through my little paragraph of notes here.
I'm just like, keep going, girl.
Yeah. Let's see. Then eventually their father comes back and realizes, my children are living in a shack when I thought they were being well provided for. So we're going to take them across the border with me. And then once they get there, I'm actually just going to abuse them the entire time. The second they do not live up to my impossible standards.
Mm-hmm. And at first it was just the oldest that he was going to take. Because he was like, the other two, or... Yeah, all the other ones are too young and not fast enough. And then the Carlos, he was like, I'm fast. Yeah. And the dad was like, you're right, you are fast. Yeah. Let's go. Reyna, you don't get to go because you're too young and slow. And eventually,
Mago and Carlos are both like, we're not going if she's not going. And so they take all of them across the border, which is, as we talked about earlier, incredibly traumatic for a small child. They talk about what? They see a dead body at one point? Crazy. Crossing the border is not an easy thing, and it is not something that people do lightly. So, have empathy. We're going to repeat that over and over. Be empathetic to immigrants.
And they had to attempt it 3 times, and the third time was going to be their last. Yeah. But the first time, Reyna got sick, and so, did they get caught?
Yes.
Yeah, they got caught.
They got caught the first 2 times.
And then they were able to make it the third time, but there was a scare because there was a helicopter going over them, and they had to, hide with the smuggler in, some bushes to make sure that the helicopter didn't see them. Yeah. Let's see. Then they had to lay down in the car for hours once they finally crossed the border.
Driving all the way to Los Angeles, and it's like, wow, I would throw up so fast. I get so car sick, I would not be able to do that. It's I can't even look at my phone while I'm riding in a car. Yeah. Can't. No. I would not be able to endure crossing the border. It would not be for me. Let's see. Then once he gets to the States, their dad is physically abusive. Their mother-in-law just ignores them, basically. So it's not great. It's not a wonderful time for them. Let's see. Did I miss anything abuse-wise?
Once they're actually in the States.
Yeah.
All the stuff that their dad did to them.
Yeah, he regularly beats them and holds them to impossible standards. Doesn't let them stay home stick from school. They always have to get straight A's, or he's constantly threatening to send them back. He's always calling them bad names. He's always calling their mom bad names. Not a healthy way for a child to grow up. Okay, then getting into the historical, cultural factors, poverty is a real factor in their lives. And let me be very clear. Poverty does not cause domestic violence. There is no excuse for abusing the people that you love. But it is a factor that can make abusive people worse. It can exacerbate situations. So, Abuela Avila claimed she didn't have money to take care of the kids. Didn't have money to take care of the kids. Even though she was definitely getting money to take care of the kids and was spending it all on herself. Thank you for the hearts.
Little Gen Z one.
Mm-hmm. The cool kid one.
But then you take them apart. I know, like, obviously poverty is a big struggle, but culturally, because, like, I know Hispanic cultures are very, like, collectivist.
Yes.
So the main priority is family. So it must be really confusing as a child, especially, to have such an importance on family, but then your family is the ones that are hurting you.
Yeah.
And so it must be, like, really hard to, like, go through that dichotomy of, like, I love my family, I rely on them, but also they don't seem to care about me, and they're the ones hurting me.
And abandoning me.
So, like, where am I supposed to go? What am I supposed to do? I'm just existing, and it's not a fun existence, so why am I even here?
Yeah. Let's see. I wrote a lot about poverty. Iguala, where they're from, was an incredibly poor region, and many families were living in poverty there, and there was no real infrastructure for, like, social resources. Like, here we've got SNAP, we've got public programs for, like, healthcare, which are not enough. There's still a lot of people who are in poverty in the States, but it's like they had, as far as I could tell in the book, or at least as far as Reyna knew, no real social programs to help children. There were no food stamps, there were no free lunches at school, there was no accessible health care. It's like there was nothing to help people survive. So it really makes sense why they would be coming to the States, and it's like why so many people were so incredibly stressed that it could exacerbate abusive situations. Let's see. Then once they get to the States, they're still really poor. Their dad is undocumented for most of their childhood, and they are also undocumented for most of their childhood, so they don't qualify for any public supports in the States. At one point, Reyna has to go to the dentist, and they're literally committing insurance fraud to go get her root canal taken care of. Yeah. Poverty is real, and it is a problem. Okay, that's all I had for that one. Kyia, do you have anything else to add in?
I think you got it all.
Okay. I took extensive notes because I was a little concerned since Kyia started reading a few days ago that I was going to be doing this all by myself. So I was like, let me be overly prepared.
I tried getting the book like a couple weeks ago, but someone had it on hold, or it was like using it from the library, and so I was on hold, and I didn't get it until like this week. So I was like, okay.
Stressed me out a little, but
she's
here. We made it. All right, question number 2. Despite living with various adults, Mago essentially becomes the primary caregiver for Reyna and Carlos growing up, their little mother. Discuss how the younger siblings depend on Mago. How does this parentification affect Mago throughout her life? I talked a lot, so I'll let you have a turn.
Okay.
Let you participate in the club.
How did the siblings depend on Mago? Well, I know like one of the things that stuck out to me the most was when they were already in the States and Carlos was still wetting the bed, because that was a big thing until like he was 13, I want to say. But Mago and Reyna would like wake him up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom so he wouldn't wet the bed, because they were like sharing a bed at that point, or
they were.
I know
Mago
in Mexico,
and Reyna were sharing a bed, and then Carlos was on the floor.
Yeah. And so they were like having to wake him up to get him to go to the bathroom, but there was one night where they forgot they were sleeping. They didn't remember to get up, and so Carlos wet the bed, and he ended up their father ended up like running a cold bath and just like picking up Carlos and like tossing him in it and telling him to clean himself. And so I think a lot of it with Mago is just like trying to protect her siblings from the abuse as much as possible.
Yeah.
But also knowing that, like, she is young and there really isn't much that she can do.
Yeah.
Especially because Margot, like, idolizes her father up until she's, like, a teenager. And so she, like... and so she's like, I have this memory of my father.
Hello, everybody.
She's like, I have this, like, these amazing memories of my father, but he's not, now that we're back with him, he's not the same father that I remember, but, like, I can't let that version of him go.
Yeah.
And it takes a long time for her to be like, this actually isn't a great situation to be in, or this isn't what a father should be like. And so, but she was having to, like, protect her siblings from, like, their paternal grandmother, and she was the main one telling them not to be around their Tio Crece, because he had some things going on, and he was scary.
Yeah.
And so, sorry.
Is it Chris?
Yeah, I had the audio.
You had the audiobook.
Yeah.
Am I saying all the names wrong?
I think that was, like, the only one.
Okay.
But I was like, oh.
Again, the irony of he's the crazy one and it's Chris.
So, I mean, I don't know how it affected Margot later on, but I know, like, she wanted, when she moved out, finally, she had, like, dropped out of college, she was working a full-time job, she had just bought a car, and that's why she had to work a full-time job, because the car was a little too expensive for her to be able to, like, financially support having it. And that was a big thing when she moved out, of, like, her father being like, if you leave, then you're dead to me.
Yeah.
And so, like, she had to decide, do I leave for my own sanity, or do I stay for my sister, who I basically raised?
Yeah.
And eventually, she decides that she had to put herself first, which I'm sure that was, like, a really hard decision to make, because she spent so much time, so much of her life being their little mother.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like, past that, how it would have affected her, but it did lead to a point where it's like, do I choose myself or my family?
Yeah.
And eventually she did have to choose herself.
Which is honestly the healthy choice, because it's like, it's too much responsibility to have a 7-year-old responsible for her siblings because her parents have abandoned them. It's like, there was so much responsibility on her, and she was really their only, like, consistent emotional support for the majority of their childhood. And she had to make sure that they were safe. She had to make sure they were, you know, as comfortable as they could be, that they were eating, like, trying to keep them out of trouble. As far as how it affected her, it's like she handled far too much for any child to be asked to do pretty well, but you do see some, like, I don't know if it's, like, the trauma of everything that was happening, or if it's, like, the pressure of what was going on, but some concerning behavior, like, when they're children, you see her kind of acting out, like, when she killed those puppies, or when she tries to play, right? You know, the book is crazy when you, like, forget that the sibling killed a litter of puppies. It's like, God. Or when she tries to play mommy and daddy with Reyna. It's like, she's been forced to be older for so much of her life that it's like she keeps trying to grow up faster and faster, and it's like, why don't boys like me, blah, 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 blah.
Oh, and when their mother brought her new boyfriend to the house for Christmas.
And she has a full-on fit.
Yeah. And it's like, I wonder if she thought, like, I'm gonna have to continue to be my siblings' parents because my mom is too focused on her new man to actually take care of us, which she wasn't really doing already. But
and also she wasn't wrong because she eventually did have to continue because her mom was more concerned about being with her boyfriend.
And that's a whole thing in the book too, of all the women who are supposed to be like parental figures to them do value men more than the children. And it's just
we'll get to that. We have a question about it. We'll get there in time. Hold the rage in, Kyia. Let's see. Even when she's older, too many people. Mago is the one who throws Reyna a quinceañera. She's the one that fights the girl that's mean to Carlos because he has a crush on her. It's like she's still like emotionally caring for these kids and like looking out for them. Going through my notes here. And like Kyia talked about, it's like she had to deal with so much responsibility all of her childhood that once she gets into college and starts being more independent, starts growing up and having a little bit more space, she really starts establishing more independence and eventually decides to leave and choose herself, which was incredibly hard on Reyna, but it's like she shouldn't have been put in that position in the first place. Let's see. Did I have any more thoughts on that? What I do think is really sad, and it's not so much an effect, but just like a happenstance of the story, is that pretty soon after Mago moves out, she gets pregnant. Yeah. It's like, so she goes from being their little mother to having independence for all of like a year. And then then she's literally a mother. And it's just like, girl, you almost had it. Not that I'm suggesting she doesn't love her child or that motherhood is the wrong choice for people. It's just like, to have to be parentified for so long and then finally have a chance to grow and be yourself and then immediately get thrust back into motherhood. It's just like, girl.
She didn't get enough time to be an independent woman.
Yeah.
And then I see that you talked about when their father was beating Reyna because she was trying to go with Mago.
Yeah.
And Mago had to choose herself and her baby or her sister who was actively being beaten by their father. And like, I'm sure that was a hard choice too. But
that was a real turning point for her and for Reyna's relationship with her, because it's like after that point, it's like she mentions Mago a few more times, but it's not Mago.
Yeah.
The entire book. It's like, what am I going to do? How am I going to move on? All right. I think that's everything for question 2.
And it's like she felt as though she was abandoned by yet another parent. Yeah. And of course, like, she didn't understand it at the time. And like Mila, her stepmother, tried to like explain it later on, which Mila's a whole thing.
Oh, he's a record.
But like once you like understand it, like she was pregnant, and she couldn't really like fight him either. So like she would definitely get hurt trying to protect her, and I feel like that's the thing that like a lot of people in abusive situations have to face like all the time, of like, do I step in for this person that is being abused, or do I protect myself? And so that's like a really hard thing to decide, and I don't think there really is a right answer to that.
The right answer is people need to stop abusing their families, but that's hard to get the message through on, but we're doing our best here every day, trying. All right, question 3, because we're half an hour in and have only made it through 2 questions. We may have to cut a few. But I mean, we're covering a lot in each question, so I feel like we might cover other things as we go. All right. In what ways was Reyna's mother changed when she returned to Mexico from who Reyna remembers? Okay, so Reyna was 3 years old when her mother left to go join her father in the States. And she was gone for 2 years. And it's like, I don't know if y'all know a lot of 3-year-olds. Not a strong memory.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like she has this kind of idealized version of her mother and these like warm, happy memories. But then her mother comes back and it's like she has probably been, like, we don't hear the entire story of what she went through while she was in the States. But given that we know about her father, probably went through a fair amount. And it's like she comes back to Mexico and she's emotionally distant. She has a hard time connecting with the kids. She doesn't really seem that interested in connecting with the kids. And it's like how much of that is like the trauma of what she went through versus like the kids looking like the dad or reminding her of the dad or any number of things. Abuela Chinta talks about how her mom has always been a very proud person and that if she gets embarrassed about something, she's running away. So it's like she comes back to Mexico and she's like, she is embarrassed about her marriage failing, about having to come back to Mexico and not staying in the States. That it's like she runs away instead of dealing with it, which is unfortunate. Because, like, these kids need a stable figure in their life. And she's just like, nope, I'm out of here. Over and over and over and over and over and over again.
I think, like, because Reyna was so young, and, like, from what she remembers, like, her mom was just so hopeful of being able to make a change in their lives. And, like, she was going to the U.S. to not necessarily be with their father, but to help him make money to make all of their lives better.
Yeah.
But then she comes back and she's very much not in that mindset anymore. She is very bitter and, you know, probably like resents her kids for looking like their father and just like being mouths to feed when she is in poverty and, you know, having to do what she can to make money for them, but not really being that parent that they needed.
Yeah. And I imagine it'd be hard. Like, obviously, they weren't making buckets of money in the States, given that they were undocumented. But it's like, to be making more money and have that stability and then go back to living in a shack, having nothing. It's like, that is a hard life transition to make. Yeah. It's a lot. Reyna's mother is a handful, and we will get into it more. But we're going to move on for time's sake. What difficulties does Reyna's mother face when she returns as a single parent leaving an abusive relationship? How does her undocumented immigrant status affect her ability to leave? Well, like Kyia was talking about, she is now responsible for more children. 4 children now, because she has another child while she's in the States, Betty. She has to deal with the trauma of having been in and leaving an abusive relationship. Then she's returning to deeply broken relationships with her children that she either can't figure out or does not care to figure out how to fix. She's too embarrassed to go back to her old job, so she has to find a new one, and she's not very good at that. She's torn between wanting to be in a relationship and wanting to be there for her kids, but between like the social, cultural pressure and everything, she ends up continually chasing relationships and wanting that validation that she's like worthy and lovable after abuse, which like it's so hard because it's like I can rationalize a lot of her behavior, but it's like it doesn't justify it, and it's just like, you're a complicated lady. Okay, then as far as her undocumented status, it did make it harder for her to leave her abusive situation because she couldn't call the police about the abuse because she would get deported. When her husband cheats on her, he kicks her out, and she's got a very low paying job, so it's like incredibly difficult for her to get back on her feet. She really doesn't have any options to get back on her feet because she's in a new country. She doesn't know anyone. She doesn't speak the language. He's got her child. She can't get a lawyer. She can't go to court to get her child. She has no money. She has no resources. She hasn't qualified for public assistance. It's like she really has no choice but to go back to Mexico. Mm-hmm. And like, who knows what domestic violence services would have even been available at that point, because this would have been
like late 1970s, early 1980s.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the first domestic violence shelters in the country didn't open up until the mid 1970s, so who knows what would have even existed or been available to her. Mm-hmm. Just like a few years into shelters starting to exist at all. What else do I have here? She definitely, being a single parent, wouldn't have had enough money to be able to get Reyna and the other kids up to the States by herself, especially with like the language issue and everything. Mm-hmm. It's like between financial issues and trying to keep Betty away from her husband, she decides to return to Mexico, and it's like, that makes sense, and you should not have had to go through all that. Okay. Anything else to add?
I don't really have anything to add.
Okay.
With that one.
All right, I'll let you talk on this next one. Question 5. Discuss the male influences in the siblings' lives. What do they communicate about masculinity? How is this view of masculinity influenced by their Latino cultural heritage, and how does it differ from American views on masculinity, if at all?
Okay, the main example I could think of is with Tio Gracie. Because, like, with Carlos, he's, like, showing him the ropes of how to be a man when he's, like, 10 years old. And, you know, they're getting along really well, and Carlos loves him, but then the sisters, Reyna and Mago, they, like, hate him. Yeah. They can't stand him because he is very like indifferent towards them and has no problem being sexual around them. And even just like in general, it's like the women aren't really seen, and this is something Reyna talks about more with like just family in general, but from what I gathered from it is just like women in general aren't really seen as anything more than the homemakers and sex objects. Yeah. And nothing to really respect. They're not actual human, which that's a thing just in society in general. But even like, you know, all of the women in Mexico in their lives, they all live at home. They like don't have real jobs. They are the homemakers, whereas the men are the ones who are supposed to be like the ones making the money and
the head of household.
Yeah, and supporting them. And so it seems like the ones that you really can only rely on for like the emotional support and actual caregiving is the women, because the men spend all of their time trying to make money in an impoverished country so that everyone has food in their bellies. And even then, all of the children still have really skinny bodies with round bellies because they just can't eat as much, or they don't have the money. And so it's just, it must be difficult to be like, I am the one having to provide financially for my family and I can't even do that. And so you could see how that could tie into being abusive, because it's a very stressful situation. I need to make money. I can't make money. And so, like, financial instability is like a big thing that leads to abuse. Not the sole reason.
Yeah. And again, it's like
factor.
poverty does not justify abuse, but it can be an exacerbating factor.
And so, even though, like, we do see some of the women being some of the women being abusive, it is mostly, like, in, like, verbal or emotional ways.
Yeah.
Except their like grandma.
Yeah.
Their grandma, but she's but the men being more, like, physically abusive, because men are taught, like, their strength is physical,
toxic
not emotional.
masculinity.
So it is very similar to like in the U.S. I just think that because now in the U.S. it is like both men and women can work and have good pay. You know, when we have a high enough minimum wage and all that. But in Mexico and similar cultures, especially at this time, it's still very much like the woman is in the house, the man is the one working and not spending time with the family.
Excellent answer, Kyia. Okay, to expound on that just a little bit, because I did do a little bit of research into, like, specifically Latino culture, because you may not be able to tell, but I am of the parchment varietal of person, so had to do a little bit of looking up. All right, so according to LatinoTV.org, the cultural gender norms in the Latino community do certainly, like, play into the toxic masculinity that you see. There is this term machismo that refers to how Latino men are supposed to act, like, culturally. And it's like there are some, like, positive qualities to the concept, like courage, honor, responsibility. There's also really dangerous negatives that are associated with this, like pride, sexual prowess, high alcohol consumption, and aggressiveness. And then this combined with the female concept of Marianismo is that women are supposed to be submissive and self-sacrificing, and that is the ideal Latina lady of these women that are like the Virgin Mary. They're always just giving and not really independent and focusing on themselves, and it's all sacrificing for the family. And when you've got this, like, structure like that, where women are taught culturally to be submissive, and not just like in individual families, like we have talked about in many of our other books about how different religions will really focus on women being submissive, and we know historically that has been a real thing of women stay at home, women are submissive. It's like this is still very much a prominent part of the culture there, or at least it was in the 1970s, and it still is today according to LatinoTV.org. Let's see. Like, these factors are like a recipe for domestic violence. Having someone who thinks they are in control, it's like abusive relationships are all about power and control. So having one person who is taught culturally they are in charge and they are better than this other person that is their partner, it's like, yeah, you're gonna run into some trouble there. Let's see. Did I have anything else there? I have a whole big long paragraph that I only read half of it. In families and culturally, it's also very patriarchal, and there's an emphasis on respecting authority regardless of how they treat you. Like, just culturally, it does not matter how your parents treat you. It does not matter how the stranger down the street, if they're older than you, if they beat you, it's fine because they're older, so you better respect them. They thank you and walk away. And it's like you are literally grooming generations of people to put up with abuse. And that is not great. Like, we respect cultural diversity, but we don't support grooming people into abuse. So some growth would be nice.
Mm-hmm.
We love the Latino culture, just not that aspect.
Mm-hmm.
You
You can respect a culture and still have your issues with it. It's not a crime.
Mm-hmm.
Just don't be racist.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's the extent of what I had to say there.
Okay.
Moving on. Question 6. There are many references in this book by women stating that they are waiting to be saved by men. How is this view reinforced by culture? How does it damage women? How does it damage men? Kyia, I know you've been real fired up about this, so I'm just going to let you go. Get up on soapbox.
So a lot of the book, when it comes to like the maternal figures in their lives, is talking about how like their actual mother and then their stepmother will go, or they will put their value in men before their own children.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is a very big thing that bugged me throughout the book, of just like having these children, and both mothers had multiple children, and in fact like their mother had a new child in the States while they were still in Mexico, and then when she ends up going back to the U.S. After the kids crossed the border, she had another child that she wasn't able to take care of, and you know that could be like a cultural, like, I know that I learned how like poverty, people who are like more in poverty aren't likely to get as much like health and sex education, and so it does lead to more impoverished people having lots of kids because they probably didn't have access to safe sex. That's not what we're really talking about right now, though. But
always an important lesson, though. We always find a way to get up on our soapbox about there should be more sex education.
And just the, like, it goes back to question 5 of, like, the men are taught that they are the breadwinners. They are the ones who are supposed to be in charge of the household, making the money, and being kind of like emotionally distant from their families. But the women are taught that they need men to survive. And so it's like, of course, if they're taught that the man is the head of the household and they need them to survive, of course they're going to put men above their own children, because their children, even if they like love them in their own way, the man comes before the child. And so if there is no man in the picture, it's like we need to get one so that we can continue to survive, because we can't without. And that's really frustrating.
Yeah.
And then, of course, like you said, like it's damaging to men, because it just creates this toxicity of like, I have to be the man, I have to be masculine, I have to do X, Y, Z, and I can't be emotional. The only emotion I'm allowed to show is anger, and even then they're like, anger is an emotion, but it very much is. And so it's just, we just live in a society.
Yeah. And like, maybe it's because it was almost, what would the 70s be, 50 years ago? It's like so much of their lives really revolved around having to have a man, like you were talking about, to get by financially. Like, in Amy's famous speech in the Little Women movie, where she's talking to Timothy Chalamet, what's his name? Laurie. Where Amy's talking to Laurie, and it's like, getting married is a financial endeavor. It's not about love. It's like, this is about finances. It's like, it very much was. Like, yes, you want love. Everyone wants love. But it's like, they had financial concerns to consider. So it's like, Reyna talks a lot about how they were waiting for their dad to come save them from poverty. They were waiting for whoever to come save them. And you have all these telenovelas that are, the entire plot of everyone is focused on rich, handsome man saves poor girl from poverty. It's like, if you've got all this reinforcement coming from all sides, of course, people are going to center finding a man because you think this is going to be the answer. Because that's what all of the media is telling you. Then I think the rest of what I have here, you covered. So, excellent job, Kyia. Question 7, which we talked about this a little bit, so we'll just kind of see if there's anything we need to touch on. What does the man behind the glass symbolize for Reyna? How is he different from the real Poppy, and how does that realization affect Reyna? Okay, so for those who didn't read the book, the man behind the glass is Reyna's father. When we first meet Reyna in the book, the only version of her father that she knows is a single picture that was in their house. And so when her mother leaves, she takes that picture with her. And so this picture of her father is the only father that she has known, because he left when she was one year old. So she has no memory of him other than what this picture is. So she builds up this kind of idealized father figure, who we talked about just a second ago, is going to come save her. He's in the States. He's going to make all this money. He's going to build them a house. Oh, wait, just kidding. He's going to take me to the States. Oh, wait, he's going to provide for us, and we're going to be out of this. And it's like, she has this idea of him that does not live up to reality.
And, like, I would say that, like, Mago, like, was a big part in creating this fantasy of what their father is, because, like, she also idolized him to the point where she couldn't really see his faults. And so,
which,
like,
I mean, when your Mago would have been when he left 5 years old, 4 years old?
Yes.
So, of course, you're not going to think they have any faults at that point, because you're 4 years old. Okay, sorry, I interrupted. Where were you going with that?
I don't even know.
Okay, my bad. Got a little bit of the ADHD.
Just that, it wasn't all just in Reyna's head. It was like Mago feeding into that, because she also had this idea of him that didn't actually exist, and so they both ended up having
a hard crash into reality when he came back into their life and was like so abusive and hurtful. And it's like, how do you kind of integrate this version of who I think you should be? And they keep trying to live up to this idealized version, because it's like, if I'm good enough, he'll be this version of him that I have created in my head, when this is the person that they're actually dealing with. And they gave him so many chances and kept trying to, like, please him, and nothing worked, because they were trying to live up to this idea of him that they had in their on this pedestal in their brain.
But yeah, it really does just go back to question 6 of, like, he was supposed to be their savior. They were told repeatedly. Oh, I remember. Reyna was told by Mago, like, repeatedly that he would be coming back for them. He would come back. He is working on the house. He's going to come back, and
everything will be better then.
Together, and then they're like, oh, we're going to go to the States with him. He's going to save us from being in poverty, and we're going to have these, like, amazing, luxurious lives because of him. And so having to come to the realization, like, we are still in poverty. And we are still being abused. Is really really difficult to have to come to terms with of this man is not who I had hoped he would be.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Touching on them coming to the States. Excellent jumping off point. Reyna and her siblings cross into the States illegally. How do they each approach their new lives in El Otro Lado? Okay. Like we talked about, they were very focused on living up to their father's expectations because he was incredibly controlling. And so their lives all just kind of revolved around school and trying to please him and make him proud because he kept threatening to send them back to Mexico. So that was their lives. Eventually, they do start rebelling in their own way as they start realizing and reestablishing their autonomy and independence. They all graduate from high school, but then they start to deviate from the path that their father wanted for them. Mago gets a car and gets into credit card debt and has to drop out of school to get a job. Then Carlos wants to get married really young and his wife gets pregnant really soon, so he also drops out of school and goes to work. And Reyna's dad is so disappointed in both of them not following his chosen path for them that he's like, Reyna's not going to school either because she's just going to disappoint me. And then that's really a low point for Reyna until she hits rock bottom with the creepy model agents. And then she kind of kicks her into focus and she starts thinking about, okay, I am going to get my life back on track. And it's like, whether these are his dreams or my dreams, it's like, we're doing this because it's like, I'm not doing that anymore.
This is a side tangent, but when she went with the modeling agents, I was like,
stranger danger, stranger danger, stranger danger.
There's
it's like, this is where the book's gonna end. She's gonna get murdered here.
There's not much book left. But is she about to get into a trafficking situation? Which I'm pretty sure that's what it was.
Yeah. But, if she had not have run away, I think that would have been the end of the story.
I was like, is it really about to get even worse from here? How is that possible?
Yeah.
Luckily, she got herself out.
She got safe. But it was looking dicey there for a minute, though. We were concerned for our girl Reyna.
But at least that was something that could help her be like, okay, I can't stay in these situations anymore. I have to at least try to get a better life for myself because no one else is going to do it for me.
Okay, moving on to question 9. What pressures and challenges do Reyna and her siblings face being immigrants? So much. How do we cover the trials and tribulations of immigrants? They are in a new country. They don't speak the language. They aren't living in a shed anymore, but they are still incredibly poor. They're living in the living room while their parents are in the bedroom. They're living in a dangerous part of town. Reyna talks a lot about the gang activity that's happening nearby, and one guy dies in their front yard. They have lost their mother once again. They're living with their father that they haven't seen in 8 years and who they are learning is incredibly abusive. They're having to deal with the trauma of the abuse they're enduring at home and the trauma of leaving everything they know behind. They have to deal with racism and judgment from people at school and around town. They have to live with the fear of deportation and their father constantly threatening to send them back if they don't get deported. They have to adjust to a new culture and a new way of life and learning a whole new language. They have to live up to the incredibly high standards from their father, never missing school, never getting sick, always having perfect grades, always being on your best behavior, never being allowed to mess up. They are always trying to make their father proud while never receiving any validation from him, which, guys, I would not do well. It's like I am constantly fishing for compliments around work. It's like I need praise. And so it's just like to have a parent who you never get any sort of validation from. It's like that would be so damaging to the psyche. Okay. Any more on that front, Kyia?
I think you covered it with
okay. Yay for timeliness, efficiency. Question 10. Discuss how Betty is used by both her father and mother during their fights as a child.
Yeah, this one was definitely another point where I was like, hold on.
Okay, well, I'll let you hop up on your soapbox then.
So, we find out a little bit after the mom comes back to Mexico why she left the States. And so, their father had cheated on her and she found out. And so she decided that, hold on, how did it go? I'm like,
there was a lot of story, guys.
He was keeping Betty
he kept Betty from her. He would go to work and keep her with a babysitter. And she wasn't supposed to be visiting the babysitter, but the babysitter felt bad for her and would let her in. And then eventually it was Mother's Day. And she convinces the babysitter to let her go take Betty for an ice cream for Mother's Day. And then she's like, actually, I'm going to take Betty now. And I'm just going to go. Bye, guys.
I mean, she did have the intention to take Betty back. Yeah. But, like, on her way back, she was like,
I'm never going to see my child again.
Yeah, I can't leave my child. And so
So he comes after her with a gun and shoots some other random guy who was just nearby. So, was it the gun incident that, like, did she get deported at that point, or was it she chose to leave? I don't even remember.
She chose to leave.
Okay. There was so much going on.
Because she didn't have anyone else in the States to depend on, so she had to go back to Mexico because she had family there that would help her with her new child. But, so the father at that point was keeping Betty away from the mother just to rile her up and make her angry and kind of like prove to her that she isn't needed. He doesn't need her. Yeah. And neither does their baby.
Which, just to like add in, a big factor in abusive relationships, something you see a lot, is parents manipulating and using children as a way to get at their victim. So it's like, yeah, he was trying to rile her up, but it was also like an intentional way to continue to exert control over her and to have power over her, because it's like, well, you do not have access to your child. I'm still in charge here.
Yeah. And so when the mother is able to take Betty back to Mexico, and so when their father ends up coming to Mexico to take Mago back with him, and eventually the other three, or the other two, he is telling them, like, all right, I'll take all four of you. Since Betty is an American citizen by birth, she will fly back with Mila, their stepmother, and then you guys will have to cross the border with me. And so Mago and Reyna go to their mother to tell her that, like, they're all going to the States and they want to take Betty with them. And their mother is like, no, y'all can go. Yeah. But he does not get to take my baby. So go tell him that. And so they do, and he's just like, okay, I guess I can't take my own baby. And so, like, again, it's like using that. Ooh.
We've been on for an hour, so it has to confirm we're still here. Thanks, TikTok. We're still here. Hello.
So, like, their mother is using Betty in that same way of, like, manipulation. Of withholding something from to
have control in
yes.
the situation again.
Which, honestly, well, you already said it.
Mm-hmm.
To have control of the situation
Mm-hmm.
again. But most likely because she was the one being abused,
Mm-hmm.
to just, like, have any control at all
Yeah.
in the situation.
Mm-hmm.
And then they move back. The mother moves back
Mm-hmm.
to the States with Betty and
Mm-hmm.
doesn't tell anyone. And
Well, she leaves Betty behind at first.
yes.
She moves back to the States, leaving Betty behind, even though Betty is the only one here who's an actual American citizen.
Yeah, but the plan was that the mother would go to the States,
Mm-hmm.
and then her sister would take Betty with her later on,
Mm-hmm.
leaving her own daughter behind.
Yeah.
So that Betty could go to the States.
Mm-hmm.
But when they're all there, mother still doesn't tell
Mm-hmm.
anyone,
Yeah.
especially the father, about
Mm-hmm.
them being in the States. And so now Betty is in the States and she's more cognizant. And so, like, if she were to...
Why does it look like there's a small child outside? Okay, Sophia's got it.
Okay. Oh gosh, where was I at? We got
Betty and her mom are back in the
distracted.
States.
So, Betty, because she's more
Mm-hmm.
cognizant and, like, doesn't remember him,
Mm-hmm.
the mother is basically just like, you are never going to know him.
Mm-hmm.
He is never going to get to know you.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, being controlling in that
Mm-hmm.
way of not just...
And Reyna says that her mom tells Betty all sorts of horrible things
Mm-hmm.
about him, which, I mean, are honestly probably true, because he is kind of the worst.
Yeah.
But
She's not that great either, though.
No. It's like, I have a whole separate side tangent on this question that I wrote down, because it's just like, on the one hand, it's like, we know that she was abused.
Mm-hmm.
The mom was abused. So it's like, I can understand not wanting to have your child be with your abuser. It's like, in another country, obviously,
Yes.
you want to protect your child, but it's like, she let the other three go.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, is it about protecting your child, or is it about re-exerting control of the situation? I don't know. It's a complicated one. It's like, I can see both sides of it, and
Mm-hmm.
it probably was as complicated to her. I don't think it was like a black and white thing. I think it very strongly lives in this like gray area, but I don't know. Trauma makes you do crazy things.
Two wrongs don't make a right.
Yeah.
But...
And we also have to like consider that all of this is written from Reyna's point of view.
Yes.
It's not written from the mom's point of view. It's not written from Betty's point of view. So it's like she had all this trauma to deal with as a child that could be coloring the narrative, and like how she views her mother, and then how her mother comes across because of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and she doesn't even like mention how her mother had to have been abused until after she's already experiencing the abuse from her father.
Yeah.
Because there's one point where she is like recounting what her mother told her, of like, I can see why my mother thought that our father was going to kill her that day, because of how abusive he was to them. And even later than that, she, like, towards the end of the book, she actually says that, like, her mother was abused. So, like, for a good portion of the book, it's, like, we don't know. And we still don't know, like, exactly everything that happened between the parents. But, of course, you can get, like, an idea if he's, like, being that way with his children. Of course he would have been that way with his wife, but also he wasn't that way with Mila for the longest time until like towards the end, where like Carlos is married and the head of his own household. Mago left. Reyna is fixing to leave, although he doesn't know it. But she's on that path, and just like his whole family has broken apart, and like it's out of his control, and so
he starts exerting control
over
in the one place he thinks that he can, which is hurting Mila, and it's just like, Okay, well, that leads us into an excellent point. Next question. Mila justifies Reyna's father's abuse by saying that he was also abused as a boy. Reyna asks, if Poppy knew what it was like to be abused by his parents, then shouldn't he understand how we felt? Shouldn't he try to be a better father? Why does abuse unfold in these cycles? How can someone break this cycle? Okay. So we know that abuse often occurs in generational cycles. Like, if you're dealing with someone who is abusive, their parents were probably abusive, their grandparents were probably abusive. It is not likely that they are the first generation to be an abusive person in their relationship. Because, I mean, children that grow up in homes that are abusive are more likely to both be abused themselves or to be abusive on the other side of the coin. It's like, that is the model that they grew up with for what relationships look like and what they should be willing to accept in relationships. They learned that that's how they deserve to be treated. And let's see. Or like Reyna's father, it's like his father literally tells him when he's working with cattle, it's like, you have to beat the cows to do that what you want them to do. And so it's like, that is how he was taught as a small child to deal with other things. And it's just like, no.
Because he was 9 years old when he had to start working, and that was his first thing.
But we also even see in cases where someone who grew up in an abusive home is like, I'm never going to be like that. We've talked about it in book club a few times at this point, where Terry Crews very publicly has talked about how he grew up in an abusive home, was like, I'm not going to be like that. And it wasn't until years into his marriage that he noticed, oh, I'm doing some of these same things. Have some of these views on women and in relationships, and it's like, that is not healthy. So as far as breaking generational cycles, what you really need is, you need education, you need a sense of self-reflection and self-awareness, and you need healing. You need to learn what abuse really is and what healthy relationships look like and what they are. You need to be able to look at yourself and your thoughts and your actions and your reactions to things and be able to recognize whether you're acting in a healthy way or an unhealthy way or an abusive way. Then you have to be able and willing to take accountability and make changes if you are not making healthy choices. Then you also, like, maybe probably before the self-reflection, need to heal the parts of yourself that were hurt, because abuse ruins people's self-confidence. It ruins their self-esteem, and abuse, we have talked about many times before, literally rewires your brain. And it takes a lot of time and work to bring your mind back to a healthy place where you're not in this constant fight or flight place, and where you can learn to love yourself again and trust yourself and learn that you deserve healthy, loving, safe relationships and how to build that with another person. Okay, that is my TED Talk. Thank you for joining us.
There is something I want to say, but I feel like it fits more with question 20.
Okay. Well, then we will move on. What time is it? We've got time. We'll make it. What challenges did Reyna face when she started school in the States? Did this book teach you anything about the struggles of ESL students?
Yeah, so I guess I never really thought about it because I've never been in that situation. Of course, I realized, like, in my own high school experience that the ESL kids were separated from the other kids. But I never thought about how they would pretty much, no matter like what age they are, whenever they first start ESL, that they would have to start at like a kindergarten level.
Yeah.
And how like
you have to learn an entirely new language before you can even do anything.
And how kind of like embarrassing one could feel of having to start all the way at the bottom whenever like at home, and if they had been in the States learning English the entire time, how below they are compared to them or to the others. And then of course like the bullying even from people from like Mexican or Hispanic cultures, they were still bullied because they didn't know English, whereas these other kids grew up in the States. Even though they are Hispanic, they grew up in the States, they knew English. So kids are mean.
Yeah.
So a lot of bullying and just like having to learn the language in general. And one of the big things that she talked about was because they weren't in like a separate room.
And at least like that first year.
Yeah, for like a lot of it, when in like elementary, middle school age.
They were just at this little table in the back.
And so it was like, Reyna would talk about how distracting it was to try to be learning English, but then from her
from the aide that was in the class,
but then like the teacher was like super loud in the front and very distracting, so it was hard for her.
They all had to whisper so they weren't a distraction, but you had the entire rest of the class distracting them the entire time.
And then when they had to write like a little like short book, and
that part made me so mad.
the teacher, it was like a contest. And so, like, all of the students, including the ESL kids, had to write their own short story with pictures and everything. And then, like, whoever the teacher picks as the winner, like, gets a prize. And so, the teacher, she would, like, actually sit there and read her students' books, except for the ESL kids. She would just, like, glance at it for a second, because their aide told them that they could write it in Spanish. And so I'm sure most of them wrote it in Spanish because that's their native language. That's the language that they know at this moment. And so like the actual teacher, she would like just glance at it and just like throw it to the side.
Which made me so mad because you literally have an aide there in the classroom. It's like, ask him what the book is about. Ask for his input. It's like, ugh.
And like, they drew pictures too.
Yeah.
Can you go based off of like how well their art is? If you don't want to bother actually reading it, but you should, because they are also your students. And you shouldn't be like discriminating against them like that. Or showing bias towards the ones whose first language is English. So things like that, just kind of the bullying and discrimination from their school and teachers. And also, I know later on, the ESL kids, like, no matter where their country of origin is from, they were like all put together.
All together.
So that could have been really confusing as well. And Reyna did have a friend who was of Asian descent, and their communication, because they both were learning English, that was really the only way that they could communicate. But her friend still didn't know that much English, so that was another barrier of like, I have a barrier of not speaking English that well and being made fun of for it, to I speak English better than my friend
Mm-hmm.
who speaks a completely different language.
Yeah.
So I can't really communicate with her either.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Did you have anything to say to that?
Is there anything that you didn't cover? You did an excellent job. Let's see. As far as accommodations, they did have an in-class aide, and they talked about eventually having separate ESL classes, but there aren't really any attempts for the rest of the class to meet them where they're at. Her teachers largely don't speak Spanish. They, we all know how whitewashed history is. So there's no attempts to really bring in their culture. Reyna talks about how there's Halloween decorations up, but there's nothing for Day of the Dead, even though they're in LA. So we know there's a massive Hispanic population there. It's like, we're not even going to try, guys. We expect everyone of diverse backgrounds to assimilate to our culture, but we make no attempts to celebrate diversity and teach other children, white children, about other cultures.
Oh, Reyna didn't even know that she would be able to have access to, like, Latin writers.
Mm-hmm.
Or Latino writers.
Yeah, that wasn't a thing that existed until she was in college.
Yeah.
And her Greek teacher introduced her to Latin writers.
Who spoke, like, perfect Spanish.
Diana's a real character.
Mm-hmm. You are busy right now, sir. Did you not see the sign? We'll open the door when we're done, okay?
Another thing that I talked about in my notes is we know that there's all these challenges in education today lately of you can't teach critical race theory, you can't teach social emotional learning,
I love
you smart. Can't talk about anything that would make people uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
You have to teach both sides of every issue, and it's like that makes teachers in schools more hesitant to diversify. And obviously not all of them. Like, we know there are a lot of great teachers who are like trying to get caught up with the times and to teach a more diverse experience, but that only gets you so far if administrations, which are largely white, are like trying to enforce these policies. All right, question 13. Reyna and her siblings experience many of the same challenges, but cope in very different ways over the course of the book, discuss their different reactions and coping strategies. I feel like we talked about most of this already.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything to add that we haven't covered yet?
I mean, I would say, like, both Carlos and Maga, they, like, kind of learned, especially Carlos, learned to not show emotion, especially around their father.
Yeah.
And so, because there is one part in the book where, you know, at first, because Carlos was a little kid, he would, like, cry openly, but then, like, growing up, he learned to not really show emotion like that when he was upset. And there's a part in the book where Reyna, like, says something about how she hadn't seen him cry in so long.
Yeah.
But he finally got to a point where he just had to, like, let it out. And
when he, like, broke his leg, right?
And then Maga, of course, because she's, like, their little mother, she had to learn to kind of, like, keep her feelings inside as well and not show that she was upset, except, of course, when she was a kid and she, you know, doesn't have that regulation or self-control, so
she
like,
gets really upset and like starts acting out.
Yeah, but
like when she killed all the puppies.
But then later on, when she is older, she's like, I can't show my younger siblings that I am angry or upset because I have to be the one. I have to be the role model, and role models don't do that, or the parent doesn't do that. They don't show their emotions like that.
Yeah.
Whereas Reyna, she's the youngest one of the three, so she was able to express herself. But, of course, she didn't know how to express herself, and so she would stay quiet a lot of the time because she didn't know exactly what to say or what she was feeling at the time. Of course, like reflection, as she's an adult now, she understands it more, but she didn't understand her feelings back then.
Okay, just to hit one note for each child. Mago, like we talked about, when she's younger, gets upset and starts acting out, probably because she has to deal with the trauma of being parentified and like parenting her siblings. Like when she feeds the water lady's kids that poop burrito, or when she kills the puppies, it's like she attacks children or animals who have parents in their life because she doesn't, and if she has to suffer through that, then everyone should. Carlos has his bedwetting problem, which should be noted is an extremely common trauma response in kids. You see that a lot with kids that are going through DV situations. Those kind of psychophysical regressions. Carlos gets married really young, I suspect, because he's looking for validation and for emotional support and intimacy and safety that he didn't get growing up. And then Reyna gets really upset when people call her an orphan because she's not an orphan. She's got some real abandonment issues that we'll get into in a second. She's really shy and has a hard time making friends. And she's also a real Virgo and tries to overachieve her way out of trauma academically. And she succeeds. Way to go, Virgos.
And for Carlos, I would even say, like, going back to previous questions of how, like, the men are raised to, you know, be big and strong and the breadwinner, that because Carlos, living with his father, felt so small that he had, like, got married early so that he could be in
his
control.
own person.
Yes.
Yeah. Smart. Okay. In what ways does Reyna's fear of abandonment manifest throughout her life? So many ways.
You take it away.
Okay. Reyna gets very upset and afraid at the idea of anyone leaving her. She's terrified of the idea of losing Mago. She talks about how she wouldn't survive without Mago if Mago went to the States without her, and thinks God will punish her by taking Mago away when she takes communion at her quinceañera. She's always afraid of her parents leaving her again, and talks a lot about how she and her siblings are constantly following breadcrumbs back to their mother, no matter how many times she abandons them. We also see it manifest through Reyna's relationships with men. She accepts being treated poorly by all of these guys because she thinks she doesn't deserve better and doesn't want to be left again. Reyna talks about how continually being abandoned by her parents makes her feel like she doesn't matter, and so that's why boys all take advantage of her and then leave her because she deserves it. She has sex for the first time because Mago has moved out, and so her boyfriend is literally the only person she has left who cares about her. Then she almost gives up her chance to go to Santa Clara and thinks about staying with her father after she moves back in with him because she doesn't want him to be alone, and I suspect because she was probably a little afraid to go and live a life on her own away from her family. That's my soapbox paragraph.
I mean, I think you covered it all with that.
Okay. Moving on. Question 15. Who was there to support Reyna during different stages in her life? How did these people influence her?
I mean, obviously the most, like, consistent are her two older siblings, especially Mago being her little mother.
Yeah.
And then
Tia Imperatrice for a minute. Like, she doesn't do a whole lot, but she's nicer than evil grandma.
Yeah, and she, like, actually stood up for them and, like, took them out and things while their mother was away. And even Mago, she was like, she's not our mother, but she very much did see her as a mother because she was taking care of them.
Yeah.
And then I can't really think of anyone up until her professor.
Yeah, up until Diana.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm willing to love them, but she didn't really do a whole lot outside of the emotional support. And other than Margot, that's really all she has until she gets to college and meets Diana. And Diana has a profound impact on... What are we looking at?
Oh.
Okay.
I thought it was a comment.
No. On Reyna, she takes her in when she has nowhere to go and encourages her writing and to stay in school and to pick a school that's like the best fit for her, even though it is farther away from her family. Okay.
Financial support?
Yeah.
Wasn't really there.
No.
I mean, did they technically feed and house her? Yes. But not well. And I can't fault them. Considering the system that they were in at the time.
She really has no idea what a like normal supportive home is until she moves in with Diana.
She didn't get like all types of support. It was one or the other, and even then it was like she barely got that from most of the people in her life.
All right, question 16. In several instances, Reyna does not translate some lines of dialogue delivered in Spanish. What is the effect on readers who do not understand Spanish? What about the effects on those who do?
Okay, I'm going to bring up Emily in Paris for a second.
Okay.
Because there is a scene in, I believe, the 3rd season where the French chef, I only watched season 1. I just like learned about this scene on Twitter one day, and I was like, that is actually really great of them that they added that. But
I think I know what scene you're talking about.
The French chef
Gabriel.
guy, yes, Gabriel, he is telling Emily how exhausting it is to have to speak in her language and how he just wants to be able to tell her how he feels. And she's like, I want that too. And so he just like starts speaking to her in French and she doesn't understand like any of it. And so that's kind of what I get from that is like, it could be like, there isn't like an exact way to translate it correctly, but also it could just be like the best way to express these feelings are just in my own language. Yeah. But that's what I get from it. So of course I didn't understand because I don't speak Spanish. I didn't understand what it was, but like reading it, that's kind of what I had in mind of like, this is just how they like, she best has to, this is how she is best able to express the feelings and emotions from that moment.
Yeah. And I feel like even if you don't speak Spanish, like just like with context clues, you can get the gist of what they mean, even if you don't know like the literal translation. But for readers who don't understand Spanish, like you were talking about, it's a little taste of like how Reyna probably felt when she came to the States and couldn't understand anything that was happening around her at all. It's like reading things that challenges you is good for you people. Builds character. But it's also great for representations for people who do speak Spanish. If you've got someone who is maybe an immigrant in the States themselves and reading Reyna's story, it's like having these parts that are in your language. It's like that matters so much. Reyna talks about how impactful it was when she finally read a book by a Latino writer with a character that was like her, and it's like that wasn't until she was in college. And think about the impact that would have had on her if she'd have been reading those books instead of Sweet Valley High or the Babysitters Clubs when she was in middle school, high school.
It also, like, it could be seen as her kind of, like, rebelling against having to assimilate.
Yeah.
Of, like, this is my story.
I'm going to tell it in the way that I want.
Yeah, and I'm not going to make it as, like, perfectly aligned with what you want from me. Because, like, it was obvious in the story to me, especially when it came to like Mago assimilating, that Reyna was like against having to assimilate, but of course having to, and so I feel like that could have been like her little way of being like, this is my story.
I'm going to tell it how I want to. Which, adding on to that, I read this book a few months ago in another book club that I'm in, and which is how I was like, this is perfect, we're reading this over here now. And in the other book club, we had a meeting with Reyna Grande, and she was talking about in that meeting how there's a Spanish translation of the book, and she, of course, did her translation since it's her book, and she got a lot of flack from people because it wasn't translated perfectly, like all the grammar wasn't perfect and everything, and they're like, you should fix this, you should fix this, you should fix this, and that's not how people would say it, because her English had gotten better than her Spanish by the point she was writing this book. And she's like, actually no, it's like, this is my story, it's going to be in my words. So even if the Spanish isn't perfect, it's like, we're keeping it as it is. Thank you. So I think you're probably right on the nose there. Okay.
Yeah, we can go to the next one.
Which one are we at? Oh, this one. Okay. How is education the great equalizer for Reyna with regards to social class? Is this still a case in the United States? Is education the pathway to a better life? What complexities exist between education and class today? We talk about education a lot in book club. You have heard me get on my soapbox many times, so I'm going to let Kyia speak before I hop up. Go ahead.
Well, obviously, education is very much a necessity. Like we talked about earlier with health and sex education, you know, like I know Arkansas has like one of the highest teen pregnancy rates because of our lack of sex education and health education in general.
I think we might be number one.
I know we were at some point. I don't know if we still are, but I wouldn't be surprised. Like, we have, like, math, social studies, history, which is whitewashed. You know, all these things that are helpful and are necessary, like, you should be able to be able to read something and understand what it's saying. You know, some like literacy skills, you kind of need those. And I think that's a problem with a lot of people today, especially on Twitter.
Oh, especially everywhere. Especially everywhere. Do you know how often I get flack in my comments when I post a video because people just literally cannot comprehend what I'm putting in front of them? It's like, reading comprehension is good for you guys. It's not hard.
Which, like, we do need those skills, but also we need, like, a more expansive education on, like, cooking and how to do taxes and how to budget. You know, these very important life skills that are in place because of the type of, like, system and society that we do live in.
Yes.
But we are not equipped with those skills, and it's like as an adult, I don't know how to do taxes. I haven't done my own yet. I'm supposed to start doing it next year, and I'm terrified. But it's just like, it's kind of embarrassing to be an adult or to be at a point in your life where you should know these things, but you don't yet because it wasn't a priority. And then, of course, like, education, pathway to a better life. It is, but the way that we have evolved, they have made it harder to, because, like, you can get an education and still not get a job.
Yeah.
And so, like, it is now more of just, like, a stepping stone rather than like you go to college, you get a bachelor's, you are
guaranteed a high paying job.
Because now, like, you have to have at least a master's in order to be successful in the field that you want to be. And this is just talking about, like, university and higher education in that regard of universities and colleges, not even, like, community or trade schools. Because, like, you can learn a skill set and be successful that way. But usually, a lot of those careers are very, like, physically taxing and possibly dangerous. And so, you might consider, like, having a backup of what else can I do that isn't taxing on my body or could put me in like a dangerous spot.
Yeah.
So that's like more education that you need, and education is expensive, and so it's you have to have money to get an education, which isn't fair. And they like it is ingrained in us from a young age here in the States that you have to go to college in order to be successful. And if you don't go to college, then there's like no hope for you. You are just going to be poor and living in a shack and not doing anything with your life. And then there are people who do get an education and still end up being poor and not having anything to their name.
Educated, poor.
So, is it a pathway to a better life? If you have the money, yes. If you don't, you're kind of screwed unless you are able to find other alternatives. And even then, those alternatives aren't usually financially stable.
Yeah.
And so we need to have free education.
That would be great. Okay, so just to add in a little bit about like how education was important for Reyna specifically. School opened so many doors for Reyna. Her love of reading really helped her learn English a lot faster than it probably would have been otherwise. She got to be in band and have all these really incredible life experiences through band, which it's incredible that her band was able to provide her with a free instrument. So, because that could have been a real like social split of you can only do this extracurricular if you can afford to be in it. She got to meet Diana at community college, which people have a certain perception of community college as opposed to university, but it's like, think of the impact that Diana had on her, and she was a community college professor.
Also, getting just an associate's, you can skip a lot of the the courses that you don't need for your specific field.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a great stepping stone.
Okay. Then for the next point, obviously school is not the only path to success, and not everyone thrives under the traditional educational model. But we obviously think education is important, hence why we are here on the internet talking to you every day, because education is one of our tools to help fight domestic violence. It opens up so many doors that you may not have available to you otherwise. People could take a class in something that they didn't think they would like, and it could be the thing that they're like, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. So many jobs nowadays require a college degree, or like Kyia was talking about, a master's degree for even getting in on the ground floor. But even with education, class is still such an issue in school. Like, we've taken many steps towards progress, but it's still a division because schools are largely funded by property taxes. So the quality of your education largely depends on how wealthy the surrounding community is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Kyia went to Russellville, which is a much larger community than where I went in Dover. Our school was much smaller, it was much poorer. She was real lucky. A smart little poor dummy got to be her teacher. Like I was talking about, Reyna was lucky to be able to use a school instrument because extracurriculars are constantly being cut.
Mm-hmm.
And so schools being able to provide those resources to students can be a real class division as things are cut and they don't have the money to do that.
Especially in the arts, and even here, the kids that were in band had to like buy their own instruments.
Yeah.
They weren't rented. They had to like actually go and buy them. So like little tidbit about me, I wanted to be in band when I was a kid, but we at the time I think only had like one car, and my mom was at work, and so she couldn't take me the day that they were like picking out like what extracurriculars they wanted to do, and like if you chose band, like what instrument you would want to play. And like even if she had been able to take me to that, we weren't able to afford it.
Yeah.
So I never got to experience band, even though I really wanted to. I did get to do choir though, because that was free.
Can attest, she was a choir kid. Let's see.
And theater.
We talk about every book club, it seems like. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If children are hungry, they cannot learn. If children are like cold, if they don't have clothes that fit, if they don't have a safe home, if they don't have emotional support, they are not going to be able to learn. Poverty greatly impacts students, and as child labor laws are continuously rolled back, Arkansas, looking at you directly, it's going to be an even bigger problem for making sure kids get educated. Did you hear about the Tyson that just got in trouble up in Rogers? Yeah, they got reported because they had 11-year-olds working overnight shifts. It's like, oh my God.
Yeah, I know someone who, their 14-year-old has like a job, and she's like annoyed that a 19-year-old is got their first job just now. She's like, my 14-year-old already works. No, she said it like, my child isn't even 15 and he has a job. It's like, okay,
that
but
shouldn't be the reality.
That's weird. That's
Your
weird.
14-year-old should be in school. That should be the priority.
Their work should be school.
Yeah. Then I have, just as a little ADHD aside, in another book that I've read, Hidden Potential by Adam Grant, he tells a story about this guy who is an astronaut and how he spent his entire life working towards being an astronaut. Like, went to all the classes, did all the trainings, did everything he could to make himself the best possible applicant, and he was denied for years from the astronaut program because in his like middle school and high school transcripts there were these chunks of time where he had a lot of absences, where his grades fell, even though he like has all these advanced degrees, so he's like clearly a smart person, but there's these absences because his family was immigrants, and so they pulled him out of school to go work on the farms so they could financially survive. And it's like, he was eventually able to live his dream, but it's like, because of this piece of paper that said his grades were bad at one point when he was 12 years old, he was kept from it for so long because people weren't willing to like look at all these other extraneous factors, because social class is not considered. Okay. We'll move on.
That is something that we talk about in like rehab science a lot, of like the whole perfect attendance model is very problematic because it doesn't consider like people with disabilities and how like they have things going on to where they can't attend school every day, and how it like basically shames everyone who doesn't go to school every day for not going to school. But it's like, we're all people, we all have lives. Children don't really get to control when they go to school. But just the main thing with this question is education is very important and necessary, but there is a class divide on who gets that education, and that's bogus.
Education, great social mover, but also still has a lot of problems that we need to sort out. Okay.
And it doesn't matter the type of education you get, so long as it is helpful.
Like, I don't think you'll meet many people who are like, I wish I would have learned less in school. Education's good for you. All right, we've got 10 minutes left. So I say we just skip to the last question, because that's the one I think we really need to hit the most.
Okay.
Then if we have time, we can go back to 19, because that one's also a good one.
Okay. The main thing that... Oh, well, you can ask the question first.
Okay. You sure?
Yeah.
All right. What specific challenges do immigrant survivors of domestic violence face in the United States? What can be done to help improve services for immigrant survivors?
Well, the first part of this question, I think it's very interesting because, I talked about, or we talked about, like, the collectivist view of, like, Hispanic cultures. But also, different countries and cultures have different views of abuse and, like, what is considered abuse. So I think people who, like, come from another country to the U.S., it could be kind of like a shock of, this is what is considered abuse here.
I mean, even within the U.S.,
Yeah.
it's like, there were so many things about abuse that I didn't realize were abuse until I started working here and learning about it. And it's just like, oh my God, that's what that was?
Yeah. It's just kind of like a culture shock of like, I didn't realize I was being abused because I was living in this culture that it was normalized.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that if you're like from Mexico that like Mexicans are just abusive.
Yeah.
I'm not saying the culture is abusive. I'm just saying that there are
We talked about how it's set up to where it is kind of this breeding ground for abuse to happen, just culturally, with the machismo and marinismo and the importance of you do not talk back ever.
But I just know that like there are other cultures and countries where it's like you are allowed to like leave a mark on a kid and it not be considered abuse.
Yeah.
But then coming here where there are still places that do like allow your children to get spanked with a ruler with your permission in school. But it's more frowned upon and it's not as normalized as it used to be, whereas it might be more normalized in other cultures. And so coming to a place where you originally didn't realize it was abuse, it could be surprising to realize, hey, I actually was abused as a kid and I didn't know it.
Yeah.
Or maybe they did know it, but because it was the norm, they weren't able to say anything, but they knew how they felt. They just had to.
It's just, this is what reality is. What options do I have?
Yeah, this is just how life is. There's nothing to be done.
Okay, so what I have as far as like specific challenges that immigrant survivors face is there are some like specific ways when we're talking about immigrants that abusers will like exert control over their survivor if they are an immigrant. So that would be isolation, preventing someone from learning English or communicating with family or friends, moving to places that they don't know or where public transportation isn't available, or just moving to a new country entirely. It's like you're isolated at that point. Threatening deportation or withdrawals of petitions for legal status or threats to reveal your immigration status. Destroying legal documents or papers needed in this country like passports, resident cards, health insurance, or driver's license. Withholding documents to be able to work, making false reports to employers regarding immigration status, threatening to hurt children here or in their home country, threatening to take children or send children away if police are contacted. We saw that in the book. Cultural pressure. They may face pressure from their family or church to stay in a relationship to preserve the family unit, or they may think that behavior is normal due to cultural standards. Racism. They may face racial attacks from their abuser or fear racism from providers if they pursue services. They may fear deportation if they contact law enforcement. They may face language barriers with finding and accessing law enforcement or supportive services. Like, we're very lucky we have an advocate who is bilingual here, but if we did not, we'd have a real problem helping people who only speak Spanish. The complicated legal and immigration system can be difficult and expensive for survivors and support staff to navigate. We, as providers, rely heavily on referrals to social service programs like the Housing Authority, SNAP, healthcare, that are not able to be accessed by people who do not have legal status, making it very difficult for these survivors to get back on their feet. Then, to improve services, hopping back up on my soapbox, we need to fix the broken immigration system. It is not working. And when we're making threats to shut down the asylum system, it's like, these are people who need safety. They're coming here to be safe. Sending them back is not going to help them. They're not bringing in drugs. They're literally just wanting them and their children to be safe. Better education and cultural competency for service providers. More services that aren't government funded so immigrants have more access to those. Education about abuse and healthy relationships and just in general. Respect culture, but help change the idea and conditioning that abuse is normal and that you just have to put up with it. Challenge the societal norms and conditions that continually marginalize and oppress the Latin population and lead to high levels or risks for domestic violence. Thank you. All right, 3 minutes. Do we want to try and hit number 19, or have we kvetched enough?
Hold up, I'm reading this up.
Do we need to go back on our soapbox about immigration, or are we good?
I mean, if you have any more to add from 19, you can.
Say no more. So question 19 was, how does the distance between us contribute to the narratives of immigration into the U.S. and challenges faced by both the adults and the children who come here as immigrants, both legally and undocumented? I will just read from my notes. The distance between us is hopefully giving people who read it more empathy for immigrants. Now, that does largely hinge on people reading the book. So it's likely people who already probably feel more open to immigration since they're taking the time to read about it. But hopefully even people who are just on the fence and want to learn more, who are reading this for book club or for other book clubs, or who are having a conversation with someone else who has read the book, hopefully are more able to have empathy and compassion for immigrants. There is a lot of really dangerous rhetoric about immigration right now as we lead up to the election. And I am not telling you who to vote for. That's not what we're doing. But spreading misinformation does not help anyone. It just spreads fear and racism. We are not telling you who to vote for. Again, let me make it clear.
I would just say...
But
sorry.
If what you're about to say is who they should vote for, then we are not allowed to.
No.
Okay.
I am just going to say that the people who go on and on and on about family values
Careful where you tread here.
might want to read this book to see how our current system goes against those.
Okay, that's an acceptable answer. We have been and always will be staunchly anti-racist here. So I'm not telling you who to vote for, but we are not putting up with racist bullshit. Our goal is to end domestic violence, and we see all the time how racism plays into and affects domestic violence. So we will never condone or support the spreading of racist messaging or anything that leads to violence. My point being, because I do have one, if there's all this rhetoric about immigrants in the news and people aren't interacting with immigrants day to day and don't have that personal connection with the real people that these people are, if they do not know someone personally in their life who is an immigrant, then you can rationalize and understand how they would believe this idea of scary immigrants who are coming to take their jobs and this, that, and the other. But it is not true. These are people just trying to build a better life. Immigrant labor is a huge part of what keeps our country running. Unless you're a Native American, you don't get to complain about immigrants in this country because all of us came from somewhere looking for a better life, and that is all immigrants today are trying to do. Almost all of the children, I have this in all caps, in Reyna's hometown were malnourished and had worms. Not to say that every child in Mexico does, but it makes sense why people would want a chance at a better life. We as a nation have been spreading this idea of the American dream, and people heard it and they want a chance to build a better life for themselves and their children. Hopefully this book can help people build a personal connection to Reyna and her story of crossing the border and facing all these challenges and finally being able to build a better life for herself. Okay. All right. Now that we've both been up on our collective soapboxes many times today, we're done. We're done whining at you. So, this month, it's November already. Kyia, would you like to tell the people what we're reading?
Yeah, I'm so excited.
We've been hinting about it for months, years at this point.
Guys, we will be reading and discussing A Court of Thorns and Roses.
Yay! Finally! All the people who are in our comments, when are we going to read this? Now's our time. Now's your moment, kids.
It's because I'm here.
It is. That's a true story.
I really want to talk about it.
And now we're going to. All right. Get your fairy smut. Get reading. We'll see you guys next month. Goodbye. Okay, I have to remember how to turn all these off.